Hey, welcome to the channel, Collector's Life for Me. So today I'm going to be breaking down a new deck that I've built. It is Zur Eternal Schemer from the new Dominaria United Magic the Gathering set. So I built this deck because I love Enchantress. It's one of my favorite kinds of decks to play. But Zur is a little different. He's an enchanter. But in this case, he doesn't rely on enchantment triggers. He likes enchantment creatures. So Zur Eternal Schemer is a 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black legendary creature human wizard. 1/4 with flying. Enchantment creatures you control have deathtouch, lifeline, and hexproof. Pay 1 white, 1 colorless. Target non-or enchantment you control becomes a creature in addition to its other types and has base power and toughness, each equal to its mana value. So Zur wants creatures because he gives them hexproof, lifelink, and deathtouch, and then he also has the ability to turn your enchantments into creatures, which is a really neat ability. Both from a defensive standpoint, if your enchantment gets targeted, you can turn it into a creature in response. They did not ruin this card by making that ability be at sorcery speed. And then on top of that, there are a lot of fun enchantment creatures already out there. Now all of a sudden they have deathtouch, lifelink, and hexproof. So this is the showcase foiling. Really cool stained glass treatment they did on these cards. And personally, I'm a big fan. So let's get into the land base. These are the non-basic and utility lands. So we'll start with a command tower, Arcane Sanctum, Deserted Beach, Artikar Waste in the new borderless treatment. I recommend purchasing this card. They have not printed this card in a while, and Pain lands are great dual lands to have in your collection in multiples. Hollowed Fountain, Shockland, Glacial Fortress, Checkland, Irrigated Farmland, Skycloud Expanse, Azorius Chancery in the Double Masters Borderless, Caves of Koilos. This is also in the new Borderless treatment, Isolated Chapel, Bright Climb Pathway, Orzhov Basilica, Fetid Pools, Darkwater Catacombs, Shipwreck Marsh, Wajuka Bog, Olive Heliod's Generosity. If an enchantment goes to the graveyard, you can potentially get it back later. Field of Ruin, Myriad Landscape. Now onto the basic lands. So I used mostly my Magic Fest lands for these, just because I have them. So I've got plains, more plains. White is the dominant color in this deck. Then I have a few swamps and a few islands in both Secret Lair and Magic Fest foils. And the artifacts: a Magic Fest Soul Ring, an Arcane Signet, a Dimir Signet in the Secret Lair drop treatment, Azorius Signet, Orzhov Signet, a Talisman of Hierarchy. I need them to print some of the older talismans, and Swiftfoot Boots. So this is to protect your Zur. Okay, creature time. So we have Mother of Runes in the Secret Lair drop foil treatment. At first I wasn't a big fan of this art, but it has since grown on me. Doxos, Blessed by the Sun, so he's an enchantment demigod. Eidolon of Rhetoric, an enchantment creature. Heliod's Sun Crown, a legendary enchantment creature. I do not have the Heliod Walking Ballista combo in this deck. Runetail, Kitsune Ascendant. So this is kind of cool because in Commander you start with 40 life. So if you flip it, it becomes a legendary enchantment, which prevents all damage that would be dealt to creatures you control. Guardian of Faith, it's a nice creature phasing card. Helps protect your creatures, and in this case, your enchantment creatures. Mesa Enchantress, so this is for a bit of card draw with your enchantments. Audric Lunarch Marshal. I actually don't include this card in many decks because I'm not that big of a keyword builder. But in this case, when you have Zur out, you've already got a few keywords. Plus, if you happen to have a few other creatures on the board with keywords, now all of a sudden, every single turn before combat, even your opponents, these keywords get added to your enchantment creatures and other creatures. Archon of Sun's Grace. This helps you create White Pegasus creatures anytime an enchantment enters the battlefield, which is kind of cool because we have some of the newer Kamigawa Saga enchantments. Protean Thaumaturge, a decent card. In this case, he's cool because when an enchantment enters the battlefield, you can make him a copy of any other creature on the battlefield. Naiad of Hidden Coves. So there are counter spells in this deck, so this will help reduce the cost. Wave Break Hippocamp, another enchantment creature. When you're casting spells on your opponent's turns, you can draw a card. Calaf, Beloved of the Sea, an enchantment creature. Her ability isn't that utilized, but it could still protect some of your permanents on the board. Or a Thief. This is a fun one because if your opponents have enchantments you could use that you don't have, you can take control of them when he dies. Ephemia the Cacophony, a legendary enchantment creature. Erebos, God of the Dead. So why not have the indestructible gods in this deck, which we have a few of them coming up. Erebos the Bleak-Hearted, legendary enchantment god. Nightmare Shepherd, an enchantment creature. Doxos the Returned. Farah, God of the Polis. So this is one of the legendary enchantment indestructible gods. And why not have Zur, the actual enchanter card? This is kind of a tutor for enchantments whenever he attacks. Phanex, God of Deception, another indestructible enchantment god. Athreos, Shroud Veiled, another legendary enchantment indestructible god. So now we'll move on to sorceries and instants. So Resurgent Belief, it's a suspend card, but it can bring back enchantments from the graveyard to the battlefield. Winds of Abandon can be a win con because if you use the overload, you exile all of your opponent's creatures. Idyllic Tutor, a nice enchantment tutor. Day of Judgment, a little board wipe action. If you've got enchantments on the board and you don't have many enchantment creatures, why not wipe the board? Generous Gift, a good permanent removal. Pact to Exile, great creature removal. Wash Away, I want more of this card, or I need more of this card. This is a blue commander staple now because it is a multi-use counter spell. Pay 1 blue and counter target spell that wasn't cast from its owner's hand. When you're playing commander, the command zone is not in your opponent's hand, so it's a 1 blue commander counter spell. And then you can pay the cleave ability and it removes that wasn't cast from its owner's hand, which makes it a regular counter spell. Negate, counter target non-creature spell. Arcane Denial, a easy to cast counter spell at the cost of allowing an opponent to draw some cards, but you also get to draw a card. Counterspell. Dovin's Veto, a non-counterable, non-creature counterspell. Despark, so exile target permanent with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Brainstorm, draw 3 cards and put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library. Secret Lair drop. I like this art. So now we'll go over our non-creature enchantments that you can turn into creatures if you need to. So Argol's Bloodfast. So this is just a little, since you have creatures with lifelink, this is a good card draw. Phyrexian Arena, same thing. Lose a life, draw a card at the beginning of your upkeep. Court of Ambition. So this causes your opponents to discard cards and lose life. Sanguine Bond, whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So Era of Enlightenment. So these were the sagas I was talking about earlier. So what's really great about these sagas, which there are a few of them coming up, is you can cast them, you can go through the saga abilities, which is nice. When you're doing that, you can even make them become a creature if you want to get in some attacks or you need some blockers, you want to protect the enchantment. But after you've completed the saga, these ones actually transform. So in this case, they all transform into some sort of enchantment creature. But what's cool is they actually get exiled, then they return to the battlefield. So you will get the enchantment creature trigger the second time, in addition to any time you've cast this. So even though this deck isn't necessarily based around enchantment triggers, it's still nice to get a few extra triggers if you do have them. Machiko's Reign of Truth, another Transform Saga. Brave the Sands. So creatures you control have vigilance. This is important because it adds a keyword to your gods. What's also neat about your gods is you can make them into creatures and it will override their devotion ability because it's based on the timestamp of when that happens. So the check of devotion ability happens when the gods enter the battlefield. But if you use Zur's ability on them, now the timestamp will look at when you use Zur's ability versus the devotion. So it might make your gods a little weaker, but they'll still be indestructible. And if you have this will add vigilance to their lifeline, deathtouch, and hexproof. Ghostly Prison, so a little bit of Pillow Fort. The Restoration of Iganjo. Always Watching, another card that will beef up your creatures or enchantment creatures and also give them vigilance. Worship, if you control a creature, damage that would reduce your life total less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. What's fun is you can turn an enchantment into a creature and try to keep this active. Opalescence, so this is a tricky one, but it is a win con. So if you have this and maybe you cast Winds of Abandon or something, you've got enchantments on the board, now all of a sudden you can swing with all of your enchantments. This also does the same thing with your gods that Zur does. It turns them into creatures with power and toughness each equal to their converted mana cost, which will add those keyword abilities to them. You just have to be careful because all of your enchantments are now creatures, which are easier to remove. Court of Grace, not a big fan of Monarch cards, but it's a decent token generator. Reverence, so this is also another Pillow Fort enchantment. Sphere of Safety, big Pillow Fort enchantment. Propaganda, another one. So this is a very slow deck, so you definitely want to try to keep some sort of control and also deter your opponents from attacking you early and often. Mirror Maid, one of the best cards printed in Throne of Eldraine. There were a lot, but this one is a great enchantment that copies any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. Inventive Iteration, another Transforming Saga. And Leyline of Anticipation. Not the most useful card in this deck, but it allows you to leave your mana open and you can cast your spells more strategically if you have this on board. Now we'll check out my tokens from my CUBEAMAJIGS token box. So there's my Zur the Enchanter Ultra Pro life counter. We have a few foil Pegasi, a spirit, 2 spirits, different colors, an elephant, and a zombie. Not too many tokens in this deck. We also have the Urza Lord Artificer deck box from Ultra Pro, as well as the Urza playmat. I know Urza's not in this deck, but he's a wizard, Zur's a wizard, so why not? Well, I hope you enjoyed this deck breakdown. I am looking forward to playtesting it since it's a new deck, but beyond that, enjoy the rest of your day.